Africa is the world's poorest continent, but also the richest. It holds 60% of the planet's arable land, countless rivers, and immense reserves of gold, cobalt, and oil. Yet it remains home to most of the world's poorest people. In one place, billion-dollar mines roar with machinery, while nearby villages light their nights with candles. How can a continent overflowing with wealth remain trapped in poverty? For generations, scholars, economists, and politicians have wrestled with that question. Some say Africa was doomed by geography. Others point to centuries of colonization and exploitation. Many blame corruption and weak leadership. But none of those answers stand alone, because Africa's poverty isn't the result of a single curse. It's the result of a chain. Each link, nature, history, and human decision, has bound the next, forming a cycle that's been nearly impossible to break. To understand why a continent so rich in potential still struggles, you have to read the story written into its landscape. Long before invaders and imperial borders, the shape of Africa itself determined its fate. The continent is colossal, stretching from temperate shores to torrid equatorial jungles. That diversity is awe-inspiring, but also unforgiving. The Sahara Desert alone, roughly the size of the United States, acts like an ocean of heat and sand, an enormous barrier dividing north from south. For most of human history, it severed sub-Saharan Africa from the trade routes that crisscrossed Europe and Asia. Ideas, inventions, crops, and technologies moved east and west across the Old World, yet struggled to cross that endless desert. Rivers that might have united the continent often did the opposite. The Congo, Zambezi, and Niger twist beautifully across the land, but crash through rapids and waterfalls that make navigation nearly impossible. And even where they flow calmly, they rarely reach the sea in ways usable for major transport or trade. Africa's coastlines, meanwhile, are strangely smooth. No sprawling bays or deep natural harbours that could cradle fleets of ships. In a world built on commerce, that meant isolation. Where Europe's jagged coasts grew cities, Africa's shores remained sparsely connected outposts. Then came the climate. Within a single continent lies almost every extreme. Rainforests dripping with humidity, deserts lacking a drop of rain, highlands chilled by altitude, and plains tormented by tropical disease. Mosquitoes carrying malaria, flies carrying sleeping sickness, illnesses that wiped out human and animal labor alike. Less than 10% of the land is both fertile and stable enough to farm, and those pockets are scattered like islands. Early communities survived in small clusters, cultivating what they could and rarely forming large connected empires. Trade was slow, risky, or non-existent. While Europe's geography pushed its people together, Africa's pulled it apart. Over centuries, thousands of tribes, languages, and cultures developed in isolation. When global contact and trade finally accelerated, the continent was fragmented, rich beneath the ground but divided above it. Isolation set the stage. Exploitation made the tragedy global. When outsiders broke through Africa's natural barriers, they didn't arrive searching for partnership. They came looking for wealth. The 19th century's scramble for Africa turned exploration into conquest. European powers drew lines across maps in European capitals, carving entire civilizations into colonial trophies. Those straight borders, chosen for convenience, split kinship groups and bound ancient rivals into single states. Colonial infrastructure followed, but not for the benefit of Africans. Roads, railways and ports were built solely to extract. They ran from interior mines and plantations to coastal harbours, carrying gold, rubber, coffee and oil away to Europe. The flow only went one direction. Colonial governments were designed to control, not to serve. They taxed harshly, punished dissent, and educated just enough administrators to keep the system running. Even independence didn't cleanse those structures. The colonizers left, but their governments stayed. Governments designed for exploitation, not inclusion. New leaders inherited artificial borders and exploitable economies. Many repeated the same playbook they despised, trading resources for power and loyalty. Oil and minerals became currencies of political survival. Some countries descended into coups or endless wars, while others simply stagnated under oligarchies that spoke of freedom but ruled by fear. The wealth of Africa once again flowed outward, and what remained was resentment, division, and empty treasuries. When global powers returned decades later, they didn't bring soldiers. They brought briefcases. The new empire didn't fly flags, it flew funding agreements. And what followed was perhaps the strangest chapter in Africa's economic story, a humanitarian experiment that promised growth, but too often deepened dependency. In the 1960s and 70s, Africa became the world's grand social project. Western nations believed that money could do what centuries of empire had failed to achieve: development. Billions poured in through loans, grants, and international charities. Schools were built on paper, hospitals in name, highways in hope. On the surface, it looked like generosity. In reality, it created a new cycle of control. By the 1990s, the continent was receiving more than $20 billion a year. Yet poverty rates had skyrocketed. The problem wasn't a lack of funds, it was a lack of capacity. Money without institutions is a spark in dry grass. It burns fast and vanishes. Europe's post-war Marshall Plan succeeded because it rebuilt already functioning governments. Africa's governments, shaped around extraction, had no such foundation. When aid arrived, it poured into systems ill-equipped to use it. Corruption thrived, accountability weakened. Governments answered not to their citizens but to foreign donors. Taxation, the vital contract between people and state, shrank, replaced by dependency on grants. And the side effects were brutal. To spend international aid, currencies had to be converted, inflating their value and killing local exports. Donations of cheap goods undercut local industries. Ghana's textile factories, once humming with workers, shuttered as second-hand clothing shipments flooded in. Generosity quietly strangled initiative. Every new crisis promised another influx of relief, and every bailout delayed reform. Aid built comfort for a few, but power for none. Still, the future wasn't hopeless. In the chaos, some nations found a different path, one guided not by fortune or fate, but by rules. The nations that rise are the ones that build trust. Botswana is living proof. At independence in 1966, it was one of the poorest countries on earth, landlocked, drought-prone, and thinly populated. But Botswana's leaders made one crucial choice. Its diamond wealth would belong to its citizens, not its politicians. They built independent courts, maintained consistent elections, and prioritized education. Corruption never disappeared, but it never became destiny. Today, Botswana's economy is 20 times stronger than when it began its experiment. Its success isn't geography or luck, it's governance. Economists Darren Atamoglu and James Robinson argue that prosperity stems from inclusion. When ordinary people trust the system and can create without fear, innovation flourishes. But when institutions serve rulers instead of rules, progress withers. That challenge defines much of Africa's present. Countries dependent on aid and resources often treat citizens as afterthoughts. But where systemic reforms take root, Kenya's digital revolution, Ghana's stable democracy, Rwanda's efficient governance, economic growth follows naturally. Institutions are invisible, yet they change everything. They decide whether a diamond enriches a nation or enslaves it. Even with reform, Africa's path is steep, the past weighs heavily, and the modern world adds new chains. The brightest young professionals often leave, seeking opportunity overseas. Their skills feed foreign economies while local industries starve of talent. Investors hesitate, fearing political unrest that still erupts from old divisions. Coups in the Sahel, conflict in the Horn, instability in the Great Lakes. Many nations remain at the mercy of global markets, exporting a single resource whose price they can't control. A drop in oil or copper can collapse entire budgets overnight. China's arrival brought impressive infrastructure, but also billions in debt. The continent gained roads and rails, but with repayments that now strain fragile economies. And climate change compounds it all, turning droughts, floods, and food shortages into recurring nightmares. Yet beneath those storms is momentum. A newer generation is shifting Africa's economy from extraction to innovation. In Lagos, startups are redefining finance. In Nairobi, solar entrepreneurs electrify rural towns. In Accra, designers, coders, and filmmakers are exporting culture at a scale no one predicted. Africa's median age is under 20. As the rest of the world ages, the continent remains youthful, a force of energy, ambition, and ideas. That demographic explosion could become its greatest advantage if given systems strong enough to channel it. The narrative of failure no longer tells the full story. Across the continent, progress hums quietly but relentlessly. Gig economy apps transform how people work. Fintech innovations bring millions into formal banking. Renewable energy projects, from Morocco's vast solar fields to Kenyan wind farms, show Africa skipping over fossil fuel dependency. At the same time, democracy is deepening in unexpected places. Ghana remains a model for peaceful transfers of power. Kenya's judiciary resists political pressure. Namibia and Mauritius perform better on corruption indices than some European states. Education rates are climbing, connectivity is exploding, and women are entering leadership at record speeds. African pop culture, music, film, fashion is rewriting global trends. Investors who once saw only risk now see opportunity. The world's next growth frontier lies south, not across oceans but within the continent itself. The same geography that once trapped Africa is turning into its edge. A hub of sunlight for renewable power, fertile land for sustainable food, and coastlines sitting at the crossroads of trade between continents. Poverty cycles remain, but so do cycles of progress, and for the first time they may be moving faster. Africa has survived empire, manipulation, and mismanagement. It's endured famine, debt, and false salvation. Yet every century it endures and evolves. The difference today is belief. Across cities and villages, more Africans understand that wealth isn't what lies beneath the soil, but what they create above it. Real independence isn't political, it's structural. Maybe the question isn't, why is Africa still poor? Maybe it's, who benefits from it staying that way? Because beneath the statistics lies a continent that refuses to be defined by pity. It's rich in people, in possibility, and in potential energy waiting to be unlocked. And when stronger leadership meets accountable institutions, the question of Africa's poverty will no longer make sense. The world will need a new one, something closer to, how did Africa become unstoppable?